It's hard to balance it, but I feel like I'm trying my best, and I have not gone into a mental institution yet, so I think I call that a win.
So you started racing at 17 years old, which is a lot older than a lot of really, really professional race car drivers start. They start at like 4 or 5 years old. Was that nerve-wracking for you at all, or were you just ready to do it?
Well, so honestly, it was intimidating at first. I thought that, number one, I kind of started too late. Like, I didn't really have my parents to really be like, hey, you should totally do this. I was playing baseball, I was doing music and all this other stuff. So I kind of picked up racing as this thing where it's something I'm super passionate about, and maybe if I have the chance to do it, I'm just make me happy. And I got to do it for a while and got enough success doing it that I was like, oh, maybe I should take this a little bit more seriously and push myself to take the next step to, you know, consider me being part of the game rather than just kind of like a hobby.
Did you feel like you needed to make up that 10 years of experience gap, or are you just driving when you get the chance and doing your best with what you have?
I try to not get super wound up in the whole chase of like, you know, I'm behind on what I could have possibly learned and talent wise. I feel like, you know, when I race out there, I already know that, you know, I'm racing against people that have 200, 300 starts more than me, or have taken probably 1,000 more green flags than I have. And at first, yeah, you know, that can be a little intimidating and you want to get caught up in that. But at the end of the day, like, you're in a car, they're in a car, and you're racing on track, and all you see is the other car out there. So if you kind of just ignore that and put your best foot forward and try to do it the best you can, like, all that stuff is pretty much noise. That's something that Andy Lally definitely taught me, getting to meet him. And one of his, I'm not going to say it the way that he said it because it was a little vulgar, but basically it was something along the lines of like, worry about yourself first. And I take that to heart every time I race.
You actually spend a lot of your time in the pit area. You're a tire specialist, and you also get to teach people how to drive at the BMW Performance Center. You are literally a working class race car driver. How do you balance all of that? And how do you find the passion to pursue those things outside of your 9-to-5 work?
I would say I balance that poorly. But I try my best. Really, when it comes down to it, I think about it in the same way that I thought about it when I first started racing and I was go-karting and then working at Yogurtland. Like, it's really just, how do I make a living? And then how do I try to achieve my dreams? I definitely think that doing that and then being at the racetrack every week as much as I possibly can contribute to being able to do this at a high level. I feel like if I didn't do all of those things, then I would be even more behind when I got behind the wheel of a race car. So your boy was like valeting cars like 5 years ago, and it sucked. And here I am, doing an interview for motorsport.com with Alanis King.
You work with tires a lot with a lot of smaller teams in the Xfinity Series. What do you feel like you learn working on things in the pits when you're not driving that you can translate to driving?
So being in the pits, I feel like, especially doing tires, you're essentially seeing one of the few data points that exist on a stock car, because we don't have tire pressure sensors, we don't have accelerometers in the car. We don't have a lot of the sensors that you would see in like GT cars or modern prototypes. So when the tires come off the car and you being able to see how much they wore, you know, via the decimal point and scraping the tires and seeing what the pressure builds were, because you're directly in communication with the crew chief to see exactly what your tire pressure started off with, and you get to see where they ended up. So I think it's a huge help.
Something I think people don't realize about this is you are your marketer, you're your PR person, you're your driver. When you have people at the track who are supporting your car, you're giving them tours and helping them out. And it's really, really wild to see that you don't get a moment to think for yourself until basically you're in the car. How does that affect your ability to go out and drive when other drivers get to sit down and meditate and think for a long time about what they're going to do? But you have to actually be making it happen until you get in the car.
I would say that it affects me, I guess, but I don't know, because that's kind of all I've known. As kind of a working class guy, like I've worked in retail and food and all these things. Like, you kind of have to just get used to being able to like hold multiple hats in a workplace to be able to make a living. And I think in racing it's no different.
You also have certain expectations of the track that not everyone else does. Someone on a really high-funded team can go out and make a move and risk wrecking a car and absolutely destroying it. For you, that's harder to do. You have to go out and take care of this equipment that you're in for one race. Does it change the way you drive or the way you think while you're driving?
Absolutely. I think I've tried to pride myself on somebody who tries to take what we like to call 80%ers, which is like, you approach a situation during a race and you're like, if there's an 80% chance that this will be a successful move, I will do it. If it's anything below that, I might rethink it. And I think at the higher levels, once you get to like the top 10, top 5 winning range, like you're going to have to take those 50-50 shots. And, very rarely have I been able to take those 50-50 shots. And I think that's what definitely separates the top of the field from the bottom of the field. But where we are right now, I think to be the best driver, to take those 80%ers and maybe turn some of those 50-50 shots into 80%ers, that's what sets a lot of the not so great drivers to the great drivers. And I think, my teammate Brendan Poole, I think he's a very good example of that. He races super aggressively. He's raced for the big teams, he's raced for the small teams, and he's able to take some of those kind of, sounds like a 50-50 shot, and he turns them into 80%ers. And that's hopefully what I want to be as I grow into a better driver in the future. And I hope in general I don't have to be able to think about those shots and be one of those guys in the top 10 or so that doesn't have to really think about it. But until then, I feel like I do a pretty good job, I think.
Not only do you have to think about that, but you're also not in a car every weekend like a lot of the people around you. How do you keep your skills up?
I think from what we said before, just being in the pit lane and knowing the pulse of the garage, knowing the pulse of the adjustments, seeing what the new things are for each one of these cars. Like I feel like every time we go to the racetrack, almost similar to Formula One, like people come here with new packages, new things that they found, new upgrades to their car that we might not advertise it like on Twitter or Instagram or anything, but they happen. And keeping up with those trends and keeping up with those things is super important when you're not in the car. On top of that, like, I'm so grateful that Chevrolet and GM have allowed me to get into the simulator. I thank Shane Martin and everybody over there, because that is a tool that I never thought how close those simulators are to what we experience out there, and they're pretty dang close. Like those small things do matter, because when you get to the race, you don't have to double think about a lot of these things. You could go out there and naturally drive, which usually ends up being the best result.
You've said before that essentially I'm just a fan who was given too much access. Do you feel sometimes that you have imposter syndrome when you're out there driving or working on a car? And do you think that's something other people feel out there too?
I definitely had a bit of that starting out. The imposter syndrome was huge. Sometimes I'm like, I'd be going into a restart and I see who's behind me and I get nervous, or beside me and I get nervous. That's definitely happened to me a couple of times, like beginning of my career. And as more races have gone on and I've gotten to race against some of those people and kind of feel like I was doing a little bit better than some of the people around me, you kind of have to realize, like, yeah, you kind of have to put some of that stuff aside. And getting some of the advice of those people, they're like, there's no reason why you shouldn't believe that you're better than a lot of these people. And that helps dial back that imposter syndrome a little bit. And you start to focus that, we're here on the racetrack, but at the end of the day, you're still another person driving in a race against somebody else, which is something that you have done before. You've done it at K1 Speed, you've done it at your local go-kart track, you've done it like on the dirt track, you've done it anywhere. So, just because it's NASCAR, it's no different. It's just any other race. Just like I try to tell everybody who's like at a local short track or an SCCA, like, yeah, it really is just another race. The only difference is that maybe people are in the stands and this is on TV, but other than that, it's the same.
When people ask you why you race, or when you think about why you race, what is the answer?
I race because driving car is fun.
That is a great answer. Do you feel like social media and your presence online and the fact that you act like yourself has played a part in advancing your career?
I think social media is like, I would give it like a 70 to 80% reason why I am in the position that I am in right now. Social media has given a platform to people who otherwise would not have the voice to kind of create an audience to have their voice heard. And in doing so, that has helped me get the partnerships that is required to go racing. And I think without that, it would be very difficult for me to have the kind of racing career that I've had, because I would not have simply met those people if it wasn't for social media. And I think that the people that have made my career happen is mostly the fans. Like, I think that the people who are really nice to me on Twitter and they're super cool, like, they're part of the reason why I'm able to go racing, and they support the partners that I have. And I'm like eternally grateful for that, to the point where I almost want to like give them money. Like, guys, thank you so much. I wish I had it. But other than that, I try to give them as much as I possibly can. And I'm just grateful for all their support.
That was amazing, Brad. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you always. I hope you have a great day. And I don't know when Kansas is because I haven't looked at the schedule lately, but I am very excited for Kansas.
Well, thank you, Alanis. And that is September 28th, live
Let's
on the
go.
CW. The CW, your home for the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the next year.
Brad, literally this series is presented by the CW, so I hope it was recording.
Hell yeah. Shout out to CW.